In early Genesis, we see the use of multiple sources. They use Plato somewhat. They use the Gilgamesh epic.
Now is this flood the same as what we find in the Bible as Noah's flood?
All these sources were available in the great library of Alexandria.
One set of laws by each king that will in total be 10. Now, is it not similar to the 10 Commandments that was given to Moses? That in Genesis, we find a story of 10 kings, and in Plato's Critias, we also find 10 antediluvian kings who were the descendants of Atlas.
But that's very interesting about the tablets and the 10 kings with 10 laws.
Okay, then let's move on forward to another dialogue that I think you also have mentioned is important for understanding from where the biblical stories are coming from, and that is Critias of Plato. Now, there is only one thing that makes me think, uh, there is a great possibility that writers of the Jewish Bible had used this to structure their own ideas. So here we find story of 10 kings who lived before the great flood. Now is this flood the same as what we find in the Bible as Noah's flood? And there is more interesting thing that Plato tells us, and that is this is the type of flood that is third on the list. So what is going on here? I mean, what will you say to that?
Well, the Greeks had a number of floods. They had this flood in Critias, which might be the same as the famous flood of Ogyges, and then they had the flood of Deucalion in Pyrrha, and different flood stories. A lot of them affected different regions because they were local stories that maybe originated, who knows, in the Bronze Age, but certainly in different regions of Greece. The biblical flood story is just a single flood. It's a single world flood, and a lot of the details are much closer to what we find in the Gilgamesh epic and the epic of Atrahasis and some of the other flood stories from Mesopotamia. In Gilgamesh, all life was destroyed. There was an ark. They brought animals aboard the ark. They released swallows, I think, and ravens and, birds to see if the flood waters had subsided. So there's clearly some sort of a dependence. And in early Genesis, we see the use of multiple sources. They use Plato somewhat. They use the Gilgamesh epic, the Sumerian king list, and others. So they borrowed from various sources that were available to them. And now what's interesting from my perspective is that all these sources were available in the great library of Alexandria. Everyone recognizes that the biblical authors used the Gilgamesh epic, but where did they get it from? Just like they used the laws of Hammurabi, but where did they get that from? So all these different sources were all available in Greek, easy to read, around 270 BC when I say these books were written. But multiple sources. There's lots of sources that the authors drew on.
I was just trying to understand that in Genesis, we find a story of 10 kings, and in Plato's Critias, we also find 10 antediluvian kings who were the descendants of Atlas. And now we can see that these kings, they gathered after every 5 and 6 years. And at night in the sacred temple, they performed sacrifices. And before the dawn, they wrote down their judgments on the golden tablets. Now this is quite interesting because in the end, we can guess one set of laws by each king that will in total be 10. Now, is it not similar to the Ten Commandments that was given to Moses, and they're also on tablets?
Well, that's very interesting. Yes, and the laws were also inscribed on pillars, I believe. Um, well, there's the whole sacrificial rite that these kings of Atlantis performed every 5 or 6 years is very, very similar to the covenant sacrifices in, I think it's Exodus 34. I might be off on the chapter, but they had altars, they had the laws written, they had bullocks that were slain. There are about 10 points of similarity in all. And a number of authors have noted the parallels, but they really didn't know what to make of it. But there seems to be a definite literary dependence. Now, the 10 sons of Poseidon were actually 5 sets of twins. So they were all distinct kings over different parts of Atlantis, and not necessarily 10 generations, as in the Genesis. But in the Sumerian king list, you do have 10 very long-lived kings before the flood. And so there might be an echo of the Sumerian king list, which was also found in at the Great Library of Alexandria as part of the Babyloniaca of Berosus. So you have multiple traditions being fused together. Probably Atlas, who was a giant in Greek myth, and a lot of these semi-divine heroes that were part god and part mortal, like Hercules and others, they were all giants, and that's very similar to the giants who were the offspring of the gods and the daughters of men in Genesis 6. So there's lots of echoes here and there, and but that's very interesting about the tablets and the 10 kings with 10 laws. I hadn't thought of that before. So, hats off to you. That's a good point. I'll have to think about that. That's very interesting.